Interstate 90. Yeah. Alright guys, today we are talking about the central part of Interstate 90. So we're going to talk about I-90 in South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana a little bit. I should apologize a bit for my voice right off here. I am recording this the day after the AFC Championship game, so I spent a lot of time yelling at my TV while watching the Chiefs fortunately win. Let's take a look at the route of I-90 as we see it crosses the entire country, going from Boston to Seattle and vice versa. And as I said, today we are going to be talking about the central section of that. To take a look at the western section, click right here. And you can see the western section that we already talked about if you missed that. You're watching Control City Freak. This is the YouTube channel where we talk about interstate highways and the places that they're signed to go to. If you dig this kind of content, why not give us a like? And if you really dig it, why not subscribe? Yeah, subscribe. Okay, and a little bit of news before we go on. New feature of the channel. So, Mathman is Awesome asked me if I could please show my exit Wisconsin 60 in the I-90 Central video. I want to have you guys involved because you guys are awesome, but I can't just put every single request everybody has or these videos are going to be super long. But for the low price of one super like sticker for $5, I will in fact put in your exit if you have an exit to request. So you can go into the super like thing and tip $5, and we get more stuff about you in the channel instead of just stuff about me. Although, still gonna be a lot of me, I assure you. Alright, first let's talk about Eastbound Central I-90. We left off at the South Dakota-Wyoming border, so we'll start right here in South Dakota. Got this lovely sign with Mount Rushmore on it, no big surprise. And in South Dakota, Rapid City is the final line city right from the start, which does make sense. It probably should have been the final line city considerably earlier than this in Wyoming, but Wyoming don't play that way. At random interchanges, we don't get a city signed, and this is true in a lot of places in South Dakota, and actually these other states too. So right here, we're just getting 2 East 90, so I'm not going to be looking off the ramps too much in South Dakota. And here's a look at the area. This is what it looks like in the Badlands of western South Dakota, so pretty nice out here. 17, we're meeting US 85 for Deadwood and Lead, and I took a look at Deadwood. I've not been there, I've seen the show, cool show. Looks like a cool little place to check out. Lots of tourism out here in western South Dakota. Looking at another mileage sign, we've got next town, Sturgis Rapid City, so well done there. This is a little weird. This is in Sturgis, but the sign does not mention Sturgis at all. This is the 1 mile away sign, but the sign closer to the interchange also does not mention Sturgis. Maybe there's some Sturgis next 2 exits or 3 exits sign that I missed. I'm surprised that it talks about Deadwood and not Sturgis here, especially since Sturgis is pretty well known for tourism with a bike rally and all. Here we are in Rapid City and we get 90 East Sioux Falls from this point. I agree. Good choice, South Dakota. And we're getting 190, which is signed for Mount Rushmore and downtown Rapid City. And here's a look at Rapid City from the largest development interchange. So, see quite a bit going on here. Bigger city than really anything else in the area. And on mileage signs, we're getting Sioux Falls on the bottom line, 336 miles away. Good choice. We're approaching Wall, so we are getting wall drug billboards. I probably could have shown you guys a couple in the Wyoming section as well, but I didn't actually know where to look. And continuing along, now we've got Mitchell on the second line and Sioux Falls on the bottom line. No sign of Pierre. I probably would put Pierre there, even though it's not directly on I-90 as the second line thing, but Sioux Falls is the right one for the third line. Here's a look at the Badlands or the Black Hills, not quite sure which or if those are the same thing. And this is around where one of the old Cold War missile silos are. Now we're getting Chamberlain on the second line, so it goes kind of back and forth between Chamberlain and Mitchell and other places, I assume. Sioux Falls always maintains on the third line, so good job. Here is our exit for Pierre at exit 212. It's quite far from Pierre. Pierre is a bit north of here, and we see 90 is closed when flashing, so still lots of severe weather out in these parts. We cross the Missouri River at a pretty wide point right here. Now exit 330, we are meeting Mitchell, which is mostly known for the Corn Palace. And in fact, here is a picture of the Corn Palace. I tried to take one from the interstate, but you couldn't see it at all from the interstate, so I just looked in downtown Mitchell. Not much left between here and Sioux Falls, so we dropped down to 2 cities instead of 3. And here we approach I-29 in Sioux Falls. So 29 South Sioux City, 29 North Fargo, 90 Albert Lea, kind of the weird one there. I know Albert Lea is, the junction with I-35, but it's basically a 90-degree junction, and 35 is going to take you to Minneapolis or Des Moines. If you want to go to Minneapolis, there's a turnoff well before Albert Lea, and if you want to go to Des Moines, you're better off getting on 29 right here. So, terrible choice. At 229, we get only South 229 and 90 East, no Control City on the pull-through, although it would be Albert Lea, I assume. Should be Rochester, Minnesota. They get a raw deal, Rochester, Minnesota. We're outside of Sioux Falls, and on the mileage sign, we just get Laverne and Albert Lea. These are both Minnesota places. And welcome to Minnesota. At the first exit in Minnesota, we get 90 East Laverne. Not even Albert Lea. We're just getting basically the next town, so I don't really agree with that. And we see Laverne 10 miles away, Albert Lea 155. In Laverne, we get 90 East Worthington, so Minnesota's kind of just doing small town hopping on these random interchanges. However, in Worthington, we do get Albert Lea on the sign, so the big metropolis there, Albert Lea. Albert Lea does live on the bottom line throughout Minnesota until we get there. No mention of Rochester anywhere, though. Here's the exit for Albert Lea itself, although Albert Lea is not signed because of this exit, it's signed because of I-35. We meet I-35, South Des Moines, and North Minneapolis-St. Paul. From this point, those are definitely the correct control cities, but like I said, if you were in Sioux Falls, you would have taken 29 and 80 to get to Des Moines, and to get to Minneapolis or St. Paul, you would have taken Minnesota Highway 60 through Mankato. There's no pull-through on I-90, so I'll show you a little bit on I-35. We get East 90 La Crosse. Also not really great, but better than Albert Lea. And we see here Hayward, Austin, La Crosse. So 3 cities here signed, but no mention of Rochester, the third largest city in Minnesota. Over 100,000 people, the Mayo Clinic. This is malpractice. And from Albert Lea, we're getting a lot of East 90 La Crosses at random interchanges after Albert Lea. Rochester finally shows up here. Rochester exit, 28 miles away. Rochester exit is only like 2 miles from the Rochester city limits and only a handful of miles from downtown Rochester. So why just Rochester exit? Why not Rochester? Here is our Rochester exit, US 63. 52 is also a Rochester exit going the other way. And we see US 52 7, Winona exit 40, and La Crosse 70. Alright, US 52 spotting. Always cool when we run into that. In far eastern Minnesota, I-90 finally becomes interesting. It's an extremely boring road, basically from the Black Hills end or so until here. About 500 miles of being pretty boring. We're meeting US 61 signed for La Crescent, which is on the Minnesota side, and suddenly we're on 90 Madison, even though we aren't even to Wisconsin yet. We cross the Mississippi River, although through its lakes and tributaries, we're kind of going to be crossing it for quite a while. We enter Wisconsin on this island, and this is the best Wisconsin can do from what I could find, just Wisconsin and then county line. I couldn't find a real welcome to Wisconsin sign, and I did look for a while. Wisconsin is very weird about signing its state lines. And here we're continuing across the Mississippi, or a lake or tributary or something that basically is the Mississippi, on our way into La Crosse. And here at La Crosse we meet US 53 and we get basically a 90 through traffic kind of thing here. Although on the later part of that exit, now we do get East 90 Madison, which is probably what it should have been since Rochester, really. And here we get West Salem, the next town, Toma, where we meet I-94, and Madison. Good signage here. At random interchanges here, it is just Madison that is signed, so well done. And now we're meeting 94 for Eau Claire and St. Paul. Good signage there. And 90-94 east for Wisconsin Dells, which for some reason Wisconsin always signs Wisdells, and Madison. However, at random interchanges, it is Madison that is there and not Wisconsin Dells, so that makes sense. Wisconsin Dells is the second line, and as well it should be, and Madison is the third. We're meeting US 13 for Wisconsin Dells here. And here is Wisconsin Dells in a nutshell. To the left, we see an outlet mall, and to the right, we see a hotel with an indoor water park. Those are kind of the two big things that they got going in Wisconsin Dells. After Wisconsin Dells, we get Portage 18, so that's where we meet I-39, and Madison 46. We're going to be meeting I-39 here, so I-39 is signed. It does not get an overhead sign, but I also imagine not too many people make this movement to get to I-39 since the angles are very weird. It'd be a 270 degree or so exit to get off here. And here is Mathman is Awesome's hometown exit, Wisconsin 60. Lodi, and Arlington. You too could have your exit called out for a simple request and the low price of a $5 super like sticker. Yeah. All right, next we have Madison 33, Milwaukee 100, Chicago 181. So Madison no longer on the bottom line. We're putting the destination of I-94 and the destination of I-90 here, which is very good signage indeed. In Madison, I-39 and I-90 are signed for Chicago and 94 for Milwaukee. Well done there. And here's Highway 30 going into Madison, 39 and 90 still for Chicago. We meet the Beltline again for Madison, and now suddenly it's Janesville, Chicago instead of just Chicago. I guess as long as Chicago's on there, it's fine. We'll see if they keep that up. Oh no, what a surprise. So at the next mileage sign, Janesville's on the bottom line. Chicago goes away. We're going provincial and just signing Janesville, which is only 23 miles away. And now at random interchanges here, we get 3990 for Janesville. In Janesville, we get 3990 signed for Chicago. We're going into Beloit at the southern end of Wisconsin, so we get a list of Beloit exits, so that's cool. And now in Beloit, we meet I-43, signed for Milwaukee, and 39 and 90 are signed for Rockford and Chicago, so that's good signage there too. And welcome to Illinois. And toll ahead, the very first toll on I-90, but certainly not the last. In fact, from this point on, I-90 is going to be a toll road more often than it's a free road. And the free pavement ends as we drive through our first toll facility here. At random interchanges here on the J. and Adams Tollway, we get 39 and 90 signed for Chicago and Rockford. I mentioned this sign in the 39 video. This doesn't make any sense at all to me because we've got 20 business for State Street, which will take you to downtown Rockford. It's your fastest way into Rockford, and 3951 south to Rockford, 2 miles, which is a longer way into Rockford. However, when we meet 39, or when 39 splits off, the Rockford signage goes away, and now it's signed for Bloomington, which is correct, but Rockford traffic might be a little confused, I suppose. I guess there's not that much Rockford traffic, and I guess they probably know where they're going. Anyway, 90 East Chicago, way it should be. And we go through one of these famous Illinois tollway oases where you can dine above the interstate. At random interchanges, it is 90 East Chicago. Illinois Tollway generally runs like this. We get the next exit here for Belvedere and 12 miles ahead the exit after that. So that's generally how our signs work. We don't get a lot in the way of mileage signs on these roads. Here we are in Elgin. I might have missed an Elgin city limits or an Elgin next blah blah exits sign, but like 88 in Aurora, it's weird that we don't get Elgin on the overhead sign. We only get Illinois Highway 31 South. Elgin's a pretty big suburb, so it probably should say Elgin on there. And we're meeting 290 for Chicago and the west suburbs, 90 for Chicago and O'Hare, because 290 and 90 will meet again in downtown Chicago, so this is good signage here. Here you can kind of see O'Hare a little bit out in the distance there, the O'Hare Tower, when we are just to the north of it. And now we're meeting 190 for West O'Hare and 294 for Wisconsin and Indiana. 90 itself keeps Chicago. Here's where 90 is merging into 190 to become the Kennedy Expressway. Or technically 190 into O'Hare is still part of the Kennedy. Here's where we meet I-94. We do not have a chance to exit onto 94. It's a Y junction, and we see the CTA blue line right there in the middle of the Kennedy Expressway. I'm not going to show too much of 9094 here because I'm going to do that in the 94 video, but first I'll just call out my old exit here, Irving Park. When I was driving in from the suburbs, when I used to work out in the suburbs, I took this road every day. And we're going to be meeting 290 shortly for West Suburbs and Chicago Loop, so this sign is not switched over to Aurora yet, but we do see Aurora later. This part of the Kennedy is so cool. We just have these rapid fire exits like every other block. There's an exit, so we're right very near the heart of downtown Chicago here. And we're going to be meeting I-55 for St. Louis and Lakeshore Drive, 9094 signed for Indiana. And now 90 and 94 will split, so 90 will go to the Indiana Toll Road. It's the Chicago Skyway here. 94, the Ryan Expressway, later Bishop Ford Expressway, to Indiana. This 90 reassurance shield is pretty wild. It doesn't look to be interstate standard at all. And in fact, the Chicago Skyway itself was not considered to be interstate standard, and for a long time, they stopped signing this road as 90 and only signed it as 290, as in TO90. But now they've taken down the 2s and they decided once again that it is 90. Kind of weird. For a while, I-90 was technically 2 entirely separate roads with a 8-mile or so gap in the south side of Chicago. Chicago Skyway toll information, $5.90. Oh my God, it's a ripoff. Used to be $2 when I used to drive on that a few years ago. Well, 20 years ago, I guess. I'm old. And we get the awesome Chicago Skyway toll bridge, and the entire Skyway is considered a toll bridge and not a toll road. For some sort of legal reason, the city of Chicago built it. It wasn't built by the state, and the city was not allowed to build a toll road, but they were allowed to build a toll bridge, thus making the entire thing a elevated skyway, and therefore the entire thing was a bridge. So kind of looping around to get to there. This sadly is gone. This is from maybe 2013. This random McDonald's that was in the median of the Chicago Skyway. Pretty funny because it wasn't like a interstate looking McDonald's. It just looked like a, regular McDonald's right there. Here is the actual bridge part of the Chicago Skyway toll bridge as we cross the Calumet River. Makes sense that it's this high because you don't have to make it a drawbridge like all the other bridges on this river. Control city-wise, now we're getting 290, so they haven't gotten rid of the 2 on this sign, and also 280, 65, and 94. Lots of highways coming up. But if you don't want to get on the Indiana Toll Road, you can get off here at Indianapolis Boulevard and not pay a toll in Indiana. But now that ship has sailed, so welcome to Indiana. Prepare to pay another toll. And here is our first toll booth on the Indiana Toll Road. And our first exit on the Indiana Toll Road. We can also see Wolf Lake over here, which is pretty cool. You go through this kind of isthmus over Wolf Lake, this causeway thing. And just to the right side of I-90, we see that there is the South Shore Express, the South Shore Line, electrified rail that goes, I think, all the way to South Bend from downtown Chicago. At random interchanges, it is 90 West Chicago, no spoiler there, and 90 East Ohio. Here's a look at downtown Gary, Indiana. And just a little beyond that, we've got the Gary Minor League Baseball Field, for the Steel Yard, I think it's called, for the Gary Railcats. Now we're meeting I-65 for Indianapolis, and 90 East, 280, and 94 for Toledo, Ohio. We get a sign for 94 Detroit and Lake Station, and East 80-90 Ohio. They don't mention that you can also go west on 80 and 94 back to Chicago. It is possible to make that movement, but I imagine not a lot of people do, so they don't mention it on this sign. Alright, let's talk about Westbound Central I-90. We are going to start where we left off, which is at the 80-90 junction, and I'm not going to be covering the 80-90 junction again since I already talked about that in the 80 video, so you can check out the 80 East video right here, and you can take a look at that. Let's take a look at 90 West to Chicago and 80-94 Des Moines, although both of them do go to Chicago. So we stay on the Indiana Toll Road, and we've got 65 for Indianapolis and Dunes Highway. 65 traffic has the choice between 90 East Ohio and 90 West Chicago. Eastbound, we looked at Gary's downtown. Now we'll take a look at the Gary Steel Mill, the U.S. Steel, just to the north of downtown Gary. So the reason for Gary's tremendous growth in the early part of the 20th century and for its precipitous decline in the later part of the 20th century. We're meeting US 41, one of the last exits on the Indiana Toll Road. We are getting 90 West Chicago Skyway now. When we pass Wolf Lake again, it's a little bigger on the right side of the highway. And we get 90 West to West Chicago Skyway. I wonder if it used to say 294 there. And the Indianapolis Boulevard exit where you can get off without having to pay that large Chicago Skyway toll. When we cross in, as the city of Chicago built the Skyway, we don't get a Welcome to Illinois sign, and there's never been one to my knowledge. It's always just Welcome to Chicago and the name of the mayor there, at least as long as I've seen it. And I actually think that's pretty cool. I'm a homer, I know, but I think Chicago is way more important than Illinois as a whole. Chicago is awesome. Illinois is cool too, but, Chicago is what makes it all go. Here's a view of the Chicago skyline from the high bridge over the Little Calumet River on the Chicago Skyway. And here's another look at the Chicago Skyway toll bridge. Toll. Charged in both directions, too. Right after that, we get this exit for Stony Island Avenue and 2 Lakeshore Drive. I've actually used that one quite a bit. When I used to take the Chicago Skyway into Indiana, I often got on it at this point instead of taking the Dan Ryan. We are meeting I-94, the Dan Ryan, and we do not have a choice to go eastbound on 94. We can only go westbound, which is really northbound, but we do have a choice between express lanes and local lanes. Here's a look at Sox Park, aka New Comiskey, aka I don't know who's sponsoring it this month, so not important to me. And we're going to be meeting I-55, the Stevenson Expressway. So we see there's exits to I-55 from both the local and express lanes. This always blew my mind when I was a kid going on this section of the freeway. I was like, wow, express, local. And we're going to be meeting 290 going this direction. It is signed for Aurora. I imagine all the signs will eventually say Aurora. And we do have 55 South St. Louis exiting here as well. We are now on 9094 Wisconsin, which makes sense. They both do go to Wisconsin, just different points in Wisconsin. And here's another look at the downtown skyline. Like I say, I'll do a little more Chicago in the 94 video. Here we get the 9094 split. So 94 is now signed for Milwaukee, and 90 signed for O'Hare and Rockford. Good choices there, although I wouldn't be sad about O'Hare-Madison either. We're meeting 190 and 294 here, so 190 is going to be signed for O'Hare, and 90 west for Rockford, 294 for Milwaukee instead of Wisconsin, which makes sense at this point. You would not be going to Madison, you'd be going only to Milwaukee if you were getting off 90 to get onto 294 here. And here is the actual ramp for 294 northbound. And here we've got the Rosemont Horizon. I've seen a couple of shows there. Most notably, I saw the Foo Fighters and Weezer, so that was pretty awesome. Now we've got 290 coming up for west suburbs, and we have a toll booth coming up as well. 290 not signed for Chicago here, which makes sense because why would you be coming from Chicago to loop around to go back to Chicago? At random interchanges, it is 90 west Rockford and 90 east Chicago. Now we're meeting I-39, signed south for Bloomington, and 90 west Wisconsin. They don't mention that I-39 north is continuing on 90, and it's just Wisconsin instead of Madison, which is a little weird. When we finally get to South Beloit, 1 mile away from the border, we finally get Madison signed instead of Wisconsin signed. And welcome to Wisconsin we have up on this bridge crossing at State Line Road here, but again, I couldn't find a proper welcome to Wisconsin sign. We were just signed for Madison in Illinois, but now suddenly we are on North 39 West 90 Janesville, which it was a weird choice going the other way and is even weirder this way. Why would Wisconsin skip its own state capital or not sign it yet so that they could sign Janesville that's like 12 miles away or something? Here in Janesville, we are now finally signed once again for Madison, so it takes a while before Madison shows up on the sign. We're meeting 94 east for Milwaukee, 90, 94 west, and 39 north are signed for Wisdells. And I showed this on the I-39 video, but this is the longest tri-currency of anywhere on the Interstate Highway system, so cool to take a look at these again. And on mileage signs, Wisconsin Dells is the bottom line city here. We split with I-39 going north, and Wisconsin Dells 90-94. Here's our exit for Wisdells. We saw it on the way here, the main exit. In Wisconsin Dells, we are getting Tomah sign, which is where 90 and 94 split, but Tomah, why would you do Tomah? I think the answer here would be to sign it Minnesota. So the way this works, now we get next exit, then Tomah, then Eau Claire. Following that, we're going to get next exit, Tomah, and La Crosse. So we're going to alternate bottom line cities based on 90 and 94's next control cities. Doing it that way is fine, but on regular interchanges, they shouldn't say Tomah. I mean, Tomah is just not that important. They don't sign it really that much at all going the other direction, so that shows Wisconsin doesn't think it's that important. It should just be 90-94 Minnesota, because they're both going there. Same way Illinois does it for Wisconsin. And here we are in Tomah, where the I's divide. So 94 west, Eau Claire, St. Paul, just perfect. 90 west, Tomah, La Crosse. Tomah's signed because of this intersection. We don't care about Tomah. It's not that important. It should be 90 west, La Crosse, Rochester. And at random interchanges, it is signed for La Crosse once we get to Tomah. So Wistop plays along with this Minnesota nonsense of ignoring Rochester. So we get Sparta, La Crosse, and Albert Lee. That should be Sparta, La Crosse, and Rochester. Here's our exit for La Crosse, and now we just get West 90 ahead. No control city, kind of a through traffic sort of thing. Although the control city, if it were there, I guess would be Albert Lee, so that would be more annoying. And at this 53 interchange, it is 90 West Minnesota. So Wisconsin, you can do it that way. You're going to call it Minnesota there. Why can't you do it from Wisconsin Dells? Here we cross the Mississippi River once again, back into Minnesota. I was not able to find a welcome to Minnesota sign going in this direction. And here we get 14 and 61 for Winona and 90 for Albert Lee. Here's that really pretty section in eastern Minnesota once again. And at this random interchange, we're getting La Crosse for east, and west we're getting Austin. So no Rochester, no Albert Lee, Austin. Why? Okay, 2 random state highways and then Albert Lee. Why couldn't you at least have Rochester the second line there? Here's our Rochester exit, US 52. So coming from this direction, it's 52 you would take, not 63. And now we've got US 63, 7, Austin 37, and Albert Lee 57. So signing Austin is further away than Rochester. Why not just sign Rochester in that previous sign on the random interchange? Here we meet 35 North Minneapolis St. Paul and South Albert Lee in Des Moines. So gotta have that Albert Lee there. And if we look on I-35, since we don't have a pull-through on 90 itself, we get 90 West Sioux Falls. However, at the very next random interchange in Albert Lee, we get 90 West Blue Earth. Minnesota kind of sticks to this bit. The secondary becomes the primary at each and every random interchange except for the bigger ones. Illinois does that too, but Minnesota, I don't know, maybe it's because I know all the cities in Illinois and I don't know Blue Earth, Minnesota, but it seems more provincial in Minnesota because they do it so much and with such small, not well-known towns. See, here we get 90 West Fairmont. Next we get 90 West Jackson. And then we get 90 West Sioux Falls at this slightly bigger interchange here. But then it goes back to Worthington, skipping Sioux Falls, or not mentioning it yet. And then in Worthington, we get West 90 Laverne. Again, the next town over instead of Sioux Falls. Makes no sense to do such small signing places. It's like, I don't know, is Minnesota the Midwestern Pennsylvania? And in Laverne, finally, when we're at the very end of the line in Minnesota, we get West 90 Sioux Falls. And at this point, Beaver Creek is still in Minnesota, and Sioux Falls is only 24 miles away. Welcome back to South Dakota. Here we meet 229, and just like on the other 229 exit, there is no control cities whatsoever. I-29, we see 90 for Rapid City, which is just the exact right pick. 29 South Sioux City, 29 North Fargo. All right. At this random interchange, we are getting Mitchell instead of Rapid City. And at this random interchange, we get Plankinton. I think this is in Mitchell. We get Plankinton. Wall Drug coming soon. A lot of the mileage signs are like this. We get Rapid City and Black Hills both at the same number of miles away. We cross the Missouri River once again, and we're doing the same thing. Black Hills and Rapid City, equal number of miles away. We meet the exit for Pierre once again and are reminded that there can be some serious weather on this road. Here is the site of an old missile silo. I showed you kind of a field on the other way, but here we actually get to see some kind of visitor center or something at this one. So looks pretty cool. Glad we didn't use them. And we are getting the exit for Wall Drug. We get the giant dinosaur right here on the side of the road with the exit for Wall Drug. Here is Wall Drug itself. I've actually never been there. The one time I drove on this section of 90, it was in the middle of the night, so it wouldn't have been open anyway. And we see from Wall, Rapid City is the next city picked. Quite scenic and wild out here in western South Dakota. And we meet 190 for Mount Rushmore and downtown Rapid City once again. And we are now on 90 West Gillette. I think I might modify my position on Gillette. Going westbound, Gillette probably is the right choice. Or from here you could have Billings Gillette, and then at the state highway turnoff that you would use to get to 212, sign that for Billings and 90 for Gillette. So Billings, Gillette, or Gillette here. Sturgis 21 and Gillette is on the bottom line at 130 miles away. Our final mileage sign of South Dakota, and they are all cities that are in Wyoming. But Gillette is on the bottom line, so for here that makes sense. This is after the turnoff where you would have been able to use 212. So Gillette should be the bottom line here. And welcome back to Wyoming. So that shall end this section of I-90. All right, let's take a look at Todd's the way it should be for I-90. Eastbound, I'm going to say it should be Rapid City from the jump, and it is. Then Sioux Falls, it is. From Sioux Falls, it should be Rochester, Minnesota, because it's by far the biggest thing we go near until Madison. So Rochester is the answer there. Then from the Rochester exit, sign at Madison. And from Madison, Rockford, Chicago, as they do. And then just Chicago from Rockford. Indiana in Chicago is the way to go. And then Toledo. I'd rather Toledo than just Ohio. Westbound, a little more confusing, but we'll talk it through. So westbound, Chicago obviously is the right way to start. And then I would go Rockford, Madison instead of just Rockford. And then Madison, although the O'Hare Rockford is okay. Then Madison, then Wisconsin Dells. Wisconsin Dells is a smaller place, but there's a lot of people from Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago who go there on vacation. It is a big vacation spot, and 90 and 94 both go there, so I'm fine with Wisconsin Dells being the control city there. After that, though, I would say Minnesota. Minnesota should be signed on 9094, and when 90 splits off, it should be La Crosse and Rochester, and then after La Crosse, just Rochester. Then I'd go with Sioux Falls from that point. No mention of Albert Lee, none needed. Rapid City from Sioux Falls, as they do. Correct choice there. From Rapid City, I would say Billings/Gillette, and then once you get to that turnoff that leads to 212, I would switch back to just Gillette. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Control City Freak. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be back as soon as possible to finish the I-90 series. I'm going to try and do it next week, but I can't 100% promise I will, but going to go for it. Thank you so much for watching this episode. My name is Todd, and keep on trucking.